Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
We're live at the Miami Book Fair, powered by Life Improvement Radio, Authors Corner on the Toll Education Network. You can go to my website, tolltutor.net, for more information. Twitter, Toll Tutor Neil S. Haley, Facebook. And for the live listeners, and especially, Eric, I like the fact that I'm on almost 24 hours a day in Life Improvement Radio for about 2 days straight. There's a lot of different shows that I'm out there on, especially a celebrity show, Authors Corner, all year round. You know, you're able to get to hear these authors, Eric, this weekend. Our show on Life Improvement Radio, you get to hear Authors Corner every week. And so they definitely have to go tune in and then check out the podcast site. But I'm really excited to welcome to the program, and it's always interesting, the different authors from the Miami Book Fair. Michael Deibert, author of Democratic of Congo, Between Hope and Despair. Michael, I appreciate you coming by. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. And tell our audience a little bit about your background and a little bit about yourself, and we'll get right into the book.
Well, I was a journalist for about 15 years, specializing. I spent quite a bit of time in Haiti and kind of Francophone West and Central Africa, and I've also spent quite a bit of time in Mexico and Guatemala. My first book was about Haiti between 1994 and 2004. The book that you have is about kind of recent history of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And next year I have one coming out, which is a history of the Gulf Cartel drug trafficking organization in Mexico.
Very interesting. And so your experience and background really helps in writing these different books because of just, I guess, the passion you have about that area and covering that, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's you get good over the years in working in these kind of places, I think, at encouraging people to talk to you who might not necessarily want to at the beginning.
Absolutely, and you learn so much. And Eric, as we see what goes on in these different places and changes in governments and changes in certain situations and the problems that arise in that way, it definitely brings some interesting things, Eric, right?
It does, and I think mainstream media does a lot of glorification of the negative and doesn't really cover every aspect of what's going on. And I really feel like more topics like this are necessary so that we can get an in-depth look at things.
Is that true, Michael?
Well, what I would say is, I mean, in my experience in this part of Africa, the thing that I found was, I would say, the most egregious kind of myth that had to be deconstructed was this idea that Rwanda, which is kind of touted as this big success story in that part of the world, is a country to be emulated. I mean, Rwanda's kind of renaissance since the 1994 genocide basically came at the price of hundreds of thousands of lives in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and the looting of mineral resources from that country, something that other countries in the region, such as Zimbabwe and Uganda, and also multinational corporations such as AngloGold Ashanti, First Quantum, Anvil Mining, were also complicit in.
It's so interesting, and I guess when we learn about these different things of different countries and the way they're developing and stuff like that, what would you say Congo and the growth, especially becoming more democratic in certain aspects, and the growth of the country in the last 20, 30 years?
Well, I would say since the assuming of the presidency of Joseph Kabila in 2001, Congo had, I think, what was a quite violent election, but an election generally reflective of the popular will in 2006, and then a highly compromised and corrupted one in 2011. Kabila, much like Museveni in Uganda and Kagame in Rwanda, has been able to get away with a whole bunch of kind of horrible excesses, I would say, because the broader regional interests of places like the United States and Europe are served by those countries in various ways. I mean, Rwanda, for example, was able to send lots of troops to the region of Darfur in Sudan, which the United States couldn't do for various political reasons. Uganda took the head of the African Union mission in Somalia for many years. And so, I would say there's not, generally in my experience, countries with democratic or democracy in their name generally have little of that, unfortunately.
Absolutely, and it's quite interesting, Eric, to learn about countries that we aren't familiar with, and especially from experts like Michael.
Exactly. And Michael, do you have any other books on the horizon after this one?
Well, yeah, I have one that I wrote a couple of years ago about Haiti called Notes from the Last Testament, The Struggle for Haiti, and then next year I have one coming out called In the Shadow of St. Death, the Gulf Cartel and the Price of America's Drug War in Mexico, which looks at the organization, the drug trafficking organization, the Gulf Cartel, and kind of broader issues of the prohibition of narcotics in the United States and firearms policy and things like that.
Wow, sounds like some great interesting topics.
I hope so.
Absolutely, and it's something that's quite interesting, the development and all the different things. Do you enjoy research, Michael? Is it something you really enjoy to go and kind of travel and check out these different things and kind of dig in and learn new things?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the countries that I kind of focus on are places that maybe you don't necessarily have a whole bunch of other journalists, whether it's Congo or Haiti or the northern regions of Mexico along the border with the United States. And I guess there are other people who have a whole bunch of expertise that they can bring to countries like Afghanistan and Iraq and Israel, Palestine, which I don't necessarily have. But I feel like my strength as a researcher is going to these places and being able to dig a little bit beneath the surface and get beyond the kind of received wisdom that gets bandied about a lot.
It's such a interesting situation. What would you say in certain ways, Michael, is your favorite thing to do? Traveling or researching? What would be your?
I mean, I think I guess the most gratifying thing doing the kind of writing that I do is to be able to bring the voices of people who often don't get a voice in the discourse of what's going on with their countries to a wider audience, and hopefully make people think, and even more hopefully than that, perhaps have some small impact on policy. I mean, the general crux of the new book that's coming out on the Gulf Cartel is that there needs to be a general decriminalization of drugs in the United States, and by that I mean marijuana, heroin, meth, cocaine, because we've had this policy of a drug war since the 1970s that was started with Nixon, which has resulted in millions of deaths in places like Colombia and Mexico and Guatemala, just so some politician in the United States can act self-righteous and say that they're against drugs. And I think if there will be with the Congo book, if there's a reassessment kind of the Kagame government in Rwanda, or with the Haiti book, if there was a reassessment of the quite dismal Aristide government in Haiti, or if there's the Mexico book a reassessment of drug policy, then that will be time well spent.
Have you seen anything like a pushback on the book? Have you gotten any responses, positive or negative, from it?
The Congo book, yeah. I mean, there was Rwanda. The government of Rwanda has kind of some very active Twitter attack dogs in its various missions around the world. So I was having some exchanges with the charge d'affaires of the Rwandan mission to the UN, which he quite shockingly admitted that the government had killed hundreds of thousands of civilians in Congo because they didn't want to bother sorting them out from the militias they were trying to get rid of, which was kind of surprising. And I tried to remind him that this was a public exchange that thousands of people could read. It wasn't like an email he was sending me. But
wow. So
other than that, I think there was a real appetite among people, particularly who have spent time in this part of Africa, for a reassessment of the Rwandan government's role and the international community's role there. And I mean, it's certainly not just me. I mean, there's a great French historian, Gerard Prunier, who wrote a great book called Africa's World War that looks into some of these issues as well. So I think maybe the time was ripe to look at those issues again.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Absolutely, Michael. And what are you participating in at the Mind Book Fair? What are you doing? What activity are you involved in discussion?
Well, as a kind of avid reader, I mean, I'm going to buy some books, of course, and then I'm also speaking on a panel with a former UN diplomat who wrote a book about the situation in Darfur, which should be very interesting. I'm very interested to hear what he has to say.
All right. Well, where can we purchase your book, Michael, and learn more about you?
Well, you can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Pals, but myself, being an old kind of independent bookstore fan, I would appreciate if maybe people would go out to their local bookstore and request it and order it from there. And in terms of where you can find out more about me, I mean, I have a Twitter handle, which is Michael C. Deibert, Deibert, and I have a blog, too. If you Google my name, I generally come up pretty close.
All right. When we get back, thanks for stopping by, Michael. Enjoy the rest of the book fair, and I appreciate you talking to us.
Thank you very much.
All right. That was Michael Deibert. You're listening to Author's Corner live from the Mighty Book Fair, powered by Life Improvement Radio. We're going to take a little break, short break.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.